And welcome to Mr. Constitution class, episode or class number 10, Enumerated Powers, Article 1, Section 8. We're continuing on the enumerated powers. We're here a little bit early. If you want to jump ahead about probably 12 minutes, that's when class is going to start. Otherwise, you can just sit here and listen to us chit chat. I have Gabby here who loves to gab. She is a talker. So, but anyway, what's going on there, War Hamster?
Indeed, she is.
Yeah, she's adorable.
We're going to have the pleasure of her company the entire evening or
N-
afternoon.
No, she talks too much. Oh, baby. But she's beautiful too. She's gorgeous. Oh, baby. Yes, you are. I know. I love her spots. All right, come on. You wanna get down.
So, Raging Smirk tells us something about Texit Bill HB 3496. I tried to look that up and did not see anything that resembled what you're talking about. So, can you give us some more detail? Hey, Monica. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Chris. And hey, Jen.
I got three of those. I got three um, Bengal cats. Um, I got three of them. She is the only one who is like adapted. The other two are still. It's been like almost six, almost it's coming on 6 weeks, and they're still not acclimating. And I'm getting kind of at my I don't want to say my wits end, but uh, I'm doing as everything that I can. I literally went and bought an indoor dog kennel that was like it's like 8 foot by 4 foot by 6 foot tall. Um, so because I had them in cages because if I don't have them in cages, they run and they hide and I can't get them out. So what I've been keeping them in cages so that I can like at least interact with them. But I hated doing that, so I went and got this big cage, um, and I put like a cat tower in there and everything, so I can actually walk in and interact with them, and pet them and feed them, and they're still really I don't know why they're so scared, but I go in and I spend time with them, I feed them, and I do everything that I can to make sure that they have like good memories of me and they associate time together with smell and I take them treats and all kinds of stuff. So but I am I'm trying everything that I know how to do to be successful at that because they are just I mean they're gorgeous animals. Ah, they're beautiful. But one of them is just terribly afraid and like really really angry. Like not angry, but um, it comes out as like anger, but it's not anger; it's fear. So
Well, I know you love your cats. Did you get a chance to watch my new video I put out?
I did not yet. When I did not yet.
I think you'll like that one.
I'm sure I will. I want to watch it. I did three videos yesterday. I did uh, I did a video with Dr. Jason Dean in the morning. We were talking about the Trump speech. Then Later in the afternoon, we did Glitch, and then shortly after Glitch, Gordon and I did a live version of Busting the Narrative, talking about Trump's speech.
How many people did you get?
And
How many people did you get watching?
live, we had at the peak, I think it was about 160.
That's good.
It was really good. Yeah. Well, we piggybacked off of the Glitch audience,
Ah,
so which made it easier to get people in and watch. But the view count on it already is up to um, like almost 3,000, which is pretty
very
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you in the audience who don't know, and I'll promote this again at the end of the show, I'm created a new channel on Rumble under the name of Brady Fox, FOXX. And I did that because I'm starting to write Substacks, and some of the things I'm doing are letters that I want to be sent to politicians and stuff like that. And most people aren't going to take someone seriously by the name of War Hamster. So I'm having to kind of change the motif a little bit, but the hamster's not dying. He's just stepping into the background. So if you guys want to check out some new material from me, go to Rumble and look for Brady FOXX. And I'll have more stuff coming over the coming weeks. I've got a lot of good content on its way, as promised for months. And Ron, if you want to promote me on your channels, I would much appreciate it.
Oh, sure.
Especially after we watch I think the last video I did, I think is the best solo one I've done. It was a presentation, and I did up in Carlsbad, and I called it, bear with me, it's a third in a series I've been doing called The Shadow States. This is Shadow State Part 3, The Rise of the CIA.
Hmm.
It's about an hour long.
Yeah, that's definitely in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, yeah, some of the stuff that you and I used to talk about quite a bit. I've just done, over the last couple of years that we've known each other, I've just done a lot more deeper research. And so there'll be some new stuff for you as well. But the next in that series, next time I get a presentation when Doug's out of town, will be the Shadow State Part 4, and I'll be tying in the Epstein network and some of those connections, and how the banking and mafia and FBI and the CIA all run in the same circles. And it just makes so much sense. People think they think the CIA and intelligence is James Bond type super spy, but so much of it's done in the back corners and dirty alleys, and then the other part of it's done up in the penthouse.
Yep.
That's why so many celebrities are connected to the CIA, and they're all compromised. That's how the CIA works. Well, thank you, Tracy. Oh, you can call me Hamster or Brady. I go by both. I just had to change the moniker because when I'm writing the Substack, I actually have some legislators that they need to read the next article I'm putting out. So that was the appropriate step. Anyways, going back to the CIA and stuff like that. I'm reading what's her name, Whitney Webb's books.
Fantastic.
One Nation Under Blackmail. And if you have not read those, I highly recommend. But it is a long read. She's highly detailed, a lot of references to double check and stuff. But chapter I just read had an interesting narrative about Ronald Reagan and his connections to.
She's not. She kind of she lays it out about Reagan. He was no saint.
No. His connection to the Cleveland Mafia really kind of controlled Hollywood, and Reagan got a start in politics by basically running for the head of the Guild Actors Union, and he was so good at delivering, they ended up making him governor and then placed him on the throne in D.C. So you have read the book.
Well, I've read parts of it.
Good. Yeah, it really busts the narrative of, people have this picture of Ronald Reagan, and he was a great cheerleader for America, and that's what he did best. He really, when he was president, everyone felt good about themselves. But
well, I think that that's not to say that he didn't do some good things, but the fact that he never got rid of the Department of Education shows how compromised he was.
Yeah, the bad legislation that came in under him. And bottom line is, he said, we thought it was tongue in cheek at the time, that I think my vice president is probably more involved in international affairs than any vice president in history, and he was right, but not in the way we thought he was.
That's right.
And for those of you who have ever listened to me before know I've got a Doug's looking for the link, Ron.
I don't know why it is so difficult for people to find the freaking link.
Well, you sent it out a day early into an email account that I barely check, so that's how you got me today.
Well,
I only scrolled.
But that's what you asked me to send it to that one.
Well, yeah, but you do it a day early. I got to go to the next page. I didn't see it. Usually it's at the top of the page because you do it a couple hours before. It's no big deal. It was there where it belonged. I'm checking out other right now. I'm checking out other video providers other than StreamYard. There's some good ones, and mostly because StreamYard is not Safari friendly, and I keep having issues. But did I tell you, Ron? I got a bunch of new studio gear. I got my camera came in. Hang on a second. My Logitech camera came in. Oops, right there.
Nice. It's the one I have.
Is it? Are you on it right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I got a tripod for it, and I got
a
green screen.
Tell him to check his email. I sent it to IJL and Yahoo.
Yeah, we're trying to get him kicking and screaming into the 21st century. Hello, Pat. Yeah, I also got and Ron, I'm switching to a couple of wireless earbuds and a lapel microphone with noise reduction. How much do you think that whole setup cost?
I don't know, probably $800.
Probably less than half that. Did some really smart shopping, but I had someone who really knows this stuff helping me.
Did you see it, Doug?
He's not plugged in yet.
He can't hear.
That's one of the things I learned. Is you see how his strings are coming down?
Did you see it?
Yeah. See what?
The link that I sent?
Finally, yeah.
You didn't get what you didn't get the joke when I sent it to you?
I didn't read it. I just hit the link.
Oh, you didn't see how the link was like
extra
size,
big,
extra huge?
Yeah. Well, it's the only one I got. You didn't send me anything else that I.
Yes, I did. I sent it last night.
Oh, last night. You're talking to someone who gets hundreds of emails a day.
That's what I was just telling him, Doug. I couldn't find it right away either because it was a whole page back. So here's Ron just trying to be on top of things, and everyone's giving him a hard time.
Yeah. All right, Ron. We'll let you slide since you have the best of intentions.
So, Doug, I don't know if I told you. You guys notice how you guys know how
that
my
was
eyes,
a stab, by the way. But anyway, go ahead.
You guys know how my eyes been bugging me for a couple months, and I keep having they're always watering and red. I got diagnosed with something called optical rosacea on Saturday. I've never heard of that, but
optical rosacea.
Theoretically, it will get better, but it's been driving me nuts. I spend so much time looking at a computer, and my eyes are always watering. So I got these special little pads, the eyelid pads.
The just real quick, what did you guys think of Trump's CPAC speech?
Haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
I saw some highlights. I've I heard he was throwing some heavy punches at least.
That was by far and away, in my humble opinion, the most serious like it was twofold. He talked about all of the technologies and things that are coming in the future and how awesome it's going to be, and he talked about how he was going to obliterate the deep state. And he said, I am your warrior, I am your retribution. Um, I mean, he let it fly. It was quite something. So anyway,
Hello,
Well,
Stephanie. I not that I don't love everybody else in the chat room, but Stephanie was actually in a conversation today because she's in a sense a success story. She has been, of course, she did it on her own, but her position in the Central Committee there out there in Michigan and being involved in stuff, I think was partly inspired by what we do here and the things that I do and Brady does. And okay, fine, Ron will drag you into it too. And so really I see Stephanie as a not just a success story, but also as a evidence that people, to bring up what Raging Smirk just said, do stuff. And Stephanie did stuff, and very proud of her that she's involved like she is. And you're a success story. You know, hey, all this talk, but you went out there and you did something, and you're making a difference, and you're involved, and and thank you. And she says, "Amen." You certainly inspired me. That makes me feel good. That all the more reason why we did make sure that what we do gets more attention.
so speaking of doing things, I wanted to share something I did last weekend. We'll be doing this weekend, and share a couple lessons learned.
Okay.
I went door knocking in a local school district to get a special election. The gal who had won the election had to step down within a month, and the dirtbag who beat her, or who lost to her, stepped in the side door and got appointed by some other existing school board members. And this guy's first vote, he basically voted for pornography in the high school. So we have 30 days to get a certain amount of signatures to get him removed, or force him to face the voters in a special election. So he actually has to earn his position. So I'm out there getting signatures, and a few lessons learned. First of all, don't go to apartment buildings. People there they're not friendly. They don't like to talk. Go to people's houses, and you get over there on a Sunday afternoon, you catch them out doing yard work. They're more than happy to take a break and sign a petition and have a conversation. So the most effective tactic we had was get a list of the Republican registered voters in the right district, go on a Sunday afternoon, find people doing yard work, and success ratio goes way up.
Oh,
And we will be successful at this petition.
people who live in apartments are not financially invested in the neighborhood because they are typically homeowners have a much more invested. They're much more invested in the community.
Yeah, more of a vested interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and that exactly is almost word for word what I had to say, except for I added to it when Brady told me about this yesterday. Not only that part of what you just said, but that now suddenly you understand why the founding fathers only wanted people who own property to be voting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a great example. It's a whole different mentality, whole different dynamic. Now, not to put down all your interests, but because I get it. There's good people and bad people in every group, but when it comes to voting and civic responsibility, civic duties, all of that, you can get more of an enthusiastic and informed response from people who are owners.
Agreed.
All right. Well, it's good to see you guys. Let me pull out my special pocket constitution for this particular class. It doesn't say Mr. Constitution class or online class. It has a particular name on it that we don't say anymore. But that's, I have a special constitution for each of my classes, and so this is the one for this one. So
well,
guys.
it's not that we don't say it because there's animosity. It's just,
no, good guy. I mean, he and I don't see eye to eye on every issue, but good guy. Absolutely.
I don't know what happened to you, Doug, but you all of a sudden went really staticky on at least for me.
I didn't see it. I did not notice that. I didn't hear that at all.
You are as well. So maybe it's on my end. Hold on.
Well, thank you, Brady. I got blamed for something, and then you came in and said, nope, that's a bunch of, begins with horse, rhymes with it.
You get enough trouble on your own. You need to be any extra stuff thrown on you.
Yeah, I get to enough trouble on my own. Exactly.
Well, let's jump in.
Let's jump in. All right. Are you ready to roll?
I've been ready.
Okay. I was born ready. All right. So we are working our way through Article 1, Section 8. And real quick, as a reminder, for those of you who are new to this class especially, we are working our way through the Constitution line by line. The purpose of this class is so that, excuse me, enough Dr. Pepper in my system here that I'm letting out the lair here. But welcome to the program. The purpose here is go line by line through the Constitution to give you not an interpretation, not what I think or what some judge thinks or what some lawyer thinks, but what James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, who was not at the Constitutional Convention, but definitely had plenty of opinion about it and first read it on foreign shores and was in constant contact with people like Madison and Lyons and Robert Yates and a few other people when it came to their involvement in the convention. And so what I'm giving you is their perspective. We're going through this line by line. We want to educate America so that you are, number one, informed about the Owner's Manual of America. Hard to fix the car in the driveway if you haven't read the Owner's Manual, right? I want to make you constitutional mechanics. But also, when you know how it's supposed to operate, the solutions present themselves. Solutions arise. And we do need solutions for returning our republic to its rightful place as a federal republic and not some democracy that they're trying to turn it into and ultimately an oligarchy. So that's what this is about. The Article 1, Section 8 is a list of expressly enumerated powers in the Constitution. There is a concept known as the enumeration doctrine. The enumeration doctrine basically means that in order for the federal government to have a power, an authority, for it to be authorized to do something, it needs to be expressly enumerated in the Constitution. That idea is supported by the 10th Amendment. If you read the 10th Amendment, it will tell you all you need to know about this, which is, and I will read it, the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. So it tells you right there, there are powers that are delegated by the Constitution of the United States, federal government. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states or reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So if something's not in the Constitution, it doesn't belong to the federal government. It is a local issue. It's a local power. It's a local authority, localism, local issues, local government. All right, so that's where we're at. We're working our way through Article 1, Section 8. We've talked about taxation. We've talked about the debt. We've talked about the ability to borrow money by the government and the Commerce Clause. We also last week talked about the Uniform Rule of Naturalization, bankruptcies, coining money, the banking system, and counterfeiting. So we are at the post offices part of the Article 1, Section 8. Now, you'll notice each of these clauses begin with the word to. The Founding Fathers didn't want to write, the Congress shall have power, over and over and over. So they wrote those 5 words in the very first clause there at the top of Article 1, Section 8. But that's what comes before each of those words too. They just didn't write it over and over. So sometimes you'll hear me say that, but you don't see it. I am reading it as to what was intended to be there, but they decided not to write it over and over. After it is a handwritten document, you're going to want to not have to write something over and over and over if it's not necessary. So the Congress shall have power to establish post offices and post roads. The word establish is very interesting there. The word establish means, for those of you who are familiar with what I talk about, you'll recognize it immediately as being something that means to create. The job of the Congress is to create post offices. It doesn't say anything in there about maintain. The intention, for the most part, was post offices are created by, and postal roads are created because the federal government's going to have resources and countrywide data on where these post offices should be and so on and so forth. But once they're created, the states are going to take care of them. There were a bunch of people during the convention that argued against that idea that the federal government should also operate those post offices. But the attitude by most of the smaller states especially was, federal government create it, now get out of my state, we'll run it. How long do you think that lasted once the Constitution went into effect? The office of the Postmaster General was created in 1791. The Constitution was in effect 2 years before they instituted an unconstitutional agency that violates that clause. Now, people get on to me about this, say, well, Doug, federal government needs to run it for uniformity and this reason and that reason. Okay, no argument. Then there should have been an amendment because the term says establish. It doesn't say establish and maintain. And so there should have been then an amendment giving the federal government that authority. Now, what's also, excuse me, wet my whistle here. One of the other interesting things is it says as to establish post offices and post roads. That is the only place in the entire Constitution that the word roads appears. And when it comes to roads, federal government's authority is not only to establish roads, but to establish post roads, the roads that are going to be used for the post. When it comes to the creation of all other roads and the funding for maintaining those roads, the authority lies with the states. The federal government has been given no authority. And that's an interesting concept because I'm going to bring up something that I would like you to read. So if ever there's anything akin to homework, this would be it, is the 1817 veto of the bonus bill by James Madison. 1817 veto of the bonus bill. Boy, that was quick. You must have it marked.
I was reading it. I was reading it earlier.
So it was ready to roll. This is probably one of the most important vetoes you will ever read. It is probably the most important and one of the most important founding documents. And what it was about is Congress wanted the federal government to pay for roads and boatways, to create, update, fix roads and boatways and canals and things like that. And their argument was, well, gosh, military equipment's going to be traveling on those boatways and roadways, and gosh, it's for the general welfare of the country. So therefore, we need to pay for this. And James Madison, I suppose he knew something about the Constitution. Not only was he there and he was, taking notes, but the basic framework was based on his ideas. Now, a lot of those ideas didn't get through the whole frame thing because you can remember he went in as a nationalist, but for the most part, his framework was used. So that's why he's known as the father of the Constitution. So surely the father of the Constitution would understand whether or not the bonus bill was constitutional or not. And he vetoed it, saying it is not. Gentlemen, I cannot reconcile what you want to do with the Constitution. There's no authority. You want to pay federal money into creating and maintaining roadways here. And, he didn't say this, but I'm sure he was thinking this. Roads only appears in Article 1, Section 8 for post roads. Otherwise, there's no other authority for roads. The language in this bill is eerily similar to the language in the interstate highway bill that got signed into law by President Eisenhower in the 50s. Except Eisenhower was not quite the constitutionalist that Madison was, and he signed it. Doug, are you saying that the federal government's not supposed to have anything to do with our highways? Well, that's just crazy. Uniformity, after all, and they're the ones with the resources and blah, 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 blah. Then there should have been an amendment giving them the authority. Otherwise, it belongs to states. And it's up to the states to take care of the roads. It's up to them because it's better when you leave local issues with local government, and that includes highways. And we know that they abuse this, right? Oh, you want this or that to happen, or you're refusing to do what you're told by federal government? No problem. We'll just keep your highway funds.
It's
Talk
fun.
about blackmailing and extorting the states. Go ahead.
Well, you and I kind of touched on this on Sunday night when we were talking about mercantilism, but really that's the British form of economy that the founding fathers came here to get away from. What really was all about was it's crony capitalism. These people that were close to the seat of government wanted two things: protective tariffs and internal improvements. Those terms showed up quite a bit in the literature at the time. Internal improvement is basically getting government contracts.
Did he freeze?
For money to do some work. We saw the same thing with railroads with Lincoln. Those were internal improvements, and so on through history. And of course, as we got to be a more modern society, they found new games of playing the same grift. Defense contractors, etc. And that's why the federal government needs to stay out of the economy as much as humanly possible, because otherwise, those closest to the seats of power will. They'll put their people in office, and those people will write bills so that our money gets sent straight to their pockets again. And that's what the crony capitalism is all about. And that's what you're talking about here with the bonus bill.
And the internal thing, what'd you call it?
Internal improvements.
Internal improvements. That's an interesting choice of words, because I know somebody else that used that kind of language. You may know him, James Madison. James Madison, Federalist Paper number 45, to give you an idea here about what we're talking about here when it comes to post roads, post office, internal improvements. Who should be paying for this stuff? And Madison, in the veto of the 1817 bonus bill, says states. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives the federal government that authority. But he didn't just say it in that veto. He also said it in Federalist number 45. And I read verbatim from Federalist 45. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The former will be exercised principally on external objects as war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce, with which the last, the power of taxation will, for the most part, be connected. The powers reserved to the several states will extend to all of the objects which, in the ordinary course of affairs, concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, and the internal order and improvement and prosperity of the state. The operations of the federal government will be most extensive and important in times of war and danger, those of the state governments in times of peace and security. I think that pretty much clearly spells it out, don't you?
Yep, and it's morphed into something we see today, what's known as stimulus bills, where the federal government does absolutely the opposite of that, and everybody who's ever made a campaign contribution gets to put their hand in the government pocket.
Well, when you look at what the Federal Reserve was, is it essentially reversed the direction of money from the states to the federal government, to the federal government to the states, making the states beholden to the federal government. So it gave the federal government the control over the states by the power of the purse.
Yeah, well, with the 16th and 17th Amendment happening at the same time, all three of them contributed to that.
Yeah, well, two words I was going to use: the 16th Amendment. 16th Amendment, before the 16th Amendment went into place, the states basically gave an overview of the budget. They gave oversight. They determined whether or not they even pay it. The federal government wasn't taking taxation from the people. They were requesting taxation from the states, a whole different dynamic. And it allowed the state legislatures to be involved in what type of budget the federal government was creating and how federal spending was being basically put out there. When you got an oversight, it kind of reminds me of another topic which we can't really talk about, but it's the thing that happened in 2.5 years ago, where chain of custody is a big deal. And it's really kind of ties into that. You want a chain of custody. You want points along the way. You want checks and balances. That's all
Quite
important.
Often.
And when it came to the federal budget, that's before the 16th Amendment. That's what it was. There was that process that was there to ensure, may not completely ensure you got rid of corruption, but corruption would be less likely to be a problem. Okay. Yeah, tough topics here, especially considering where we're at and how we got to word certain things. Boy, I tell you what, there's certain things that about the thing I would really like to say. Matter of fact, the thing that happened after the thing on the 6th day of the first month of the following year has been getting a lot of attention. And good old Tucker just had a nice little video about certain video footage. If you haven't seen it, push that rock out of the way that you're living under and go see it. It's very good stuff.
And there's talk today that there's even bigger bombshells coming today and tomorrow, because apparently some private parties with facial recognition technology might have shared some revelations with Mr. Carlson. And that shall be tonight. And I cannot wait to get home and watch it when I watch the recording.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be in Capistrano with a class tonight, but so I'll probably get to see it later than the rest of you. But yeah, I'm definitely. And Nikki in the chat says, I just viewed that, and wow, all I'm going to say, yeah, right there with you.
You know, it's interesting. It's nothing we didn't already know.
No, true.
Yeah. And the other part, there's a really interesting side note. There's a couple of online researchers have said, what's the guy's name? The QAnon shaman.
A lot of people say that. Can't say that.
What's his name? It's in the news. Everyone says
that.
Don't
say.
All right.
Don't say that letter of the alphabet with the other letter that starts with A.
Yeah. The guy with the Viking horns, maybe he was an actor for a living. He's a climate change activist. The fact for him to be there, at a MAGA rally, a lot of people are questioning that. So, anyways, that's one of the interesting conversations I've been involved in earlier today.
Wow. All right, so we got our post offices, we got our post roads. Create it, get the heck out of the state. Lasted a whole 2 years once the Constitution went in operation, and they messed that one up. Buffalo horned dude. I like that, Tracy. That might be the right way to say it. I guess horny dude wouldn't work. Okay. So, all right, bad sense of humor. All right, so next line. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So you may recognize that if you have the ability to critically think a little bit, which I know my audience is able to critically think. Not so sure about other folks. Yes, that is the Copyright Office and the Patent Office. Now, why would the Congress, the federal government, have an authority over such a thing? Isn't that a local thing? Well, not really, because when you have intellectual property being put out by citizens of a country, and it is directly influences the innovative nature and overall growth of the union, the country, that's something that you're going to want that central government to protect. And so that's the reason why this was put in there. Any comments about that? Any thoughts, gentlemen?
Well, yeah, because I read up on this a few months back, and one of the ideas behind that is an idea can cross state lines. Whereas those physical property, it's tangible. It's a tangible versus intangible argument, and that's really the logic behind that. And I think it makes a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not only can that cross state lines, but like I said, it's good for the country's overall innovative progress. So that makes it a federal issue.
Now, of course, anything that the federal government's involved in has a chance to go get a little bit haywire. So now we've got, all kinds of issues with how patents protection, basically is bad for the consumer, which probably needs to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. But it is not unconstitutional. It's just bad governance.
Well, and that gets back to, you'll notice that the word regulate or control or restrict is not in there. The word promote and securing is. To promote and secure these writings and discoveries.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is key language there. All right. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. These tribunals, in other words, court systems, that's the circuit courts and the district courts. Congress is the ones that can create or uncreate or modify the district court system, circuit court system, and any other federal court system that is inferior to the United States Supreme Court. The Organic Act of 1801 did exactly that. It actually increased the number of courts in the circuit court system from 3 to 6. It divided D.C. into 2 counties and created federal district courts within Washington, D.C., more federal judges. The idea was the Federalist Party had lost the election, lost the House, lost the Senate, and lost the presidency. And so, as Jefferson put it, they retreated to the stronghold of the courts where it would be more difficult to dislodge them. And then in the process, expanded the court system so they could have as much power as they could get. And they've been trying to run the courts ever since. The current United States Supreme Court has the people who love that, well, let's just say a little on edge. All right. Now, if they can constitute tribunals inferior to the court, Supreme Court, that means, once again, they can modify and destroy. So let's say back in the past when the Ninth Circuit was really bad, now it's almost even. If Congress had wanted to, they could have said, you know what? We're dismantling this one. We're going to absorb it into this court, this circuit, or we're going to dismantle it and then reestablish it later or whatever. Impeach the judges. Congress has all of those authorities. Now, understand, though, it is a piece of legislation. So if they decide to do that, who must sign it? President. So there is a chance that it could be vetoed if they decided to dismantle a court or modify a court or something like that. Of course, also, if it's a big enough deal, they can override that veto with 2/3 from each house. So it is just like any other piece of legislation, something that's going to become law. The tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, creation, modification, or reduction, must go through the same process. Both houses approve the same idea, and then it goes to the president for signature.
So, Doug, there's a bit of controversy in the last year over the word constitute in that sentence. People were suggesting that meant that Congress had the right to, I don't know, do commissions investigating things that happened on a certain date. But that's not what constitute means. Constitute means to create. And
right.
If they were going to say to hold tribunals, that would be different. So the question comes up is, does such a commission actually have any place in the Constitution? Do they have the authority? If it is not, what is it?
When you say, do they have the authority? Do they have the authority to hold the type of court-type tribunal in Congress as they have? Is that the question?
Yes.
I would say no.
Because it's not pursuant to legislative action.
Right. Legislative powers belong only to Congress. If it is a judicial action, then it belongs to courts. A great example that I talked about was the subpoena of Bannon. And he didn't show up. And so they had him arrested, and there was a court case. And if you look up subpoena, it is a judicial instrument. And if you look at the history of subpoena and how it was used and ways it was used and who had the authorities over such things, it does not hold the power of law unless it's issued by a court. In other words, Congress can subpoena you, but it's different than a subpoena from the court. It is not an order, it's a request. If it comes from the court, then it has legal power, then it's a requirement. But it's a request if it comes from, it's sort of like if you were doing an internal investigation, because Ron, you are the CEO of this massive corporation with all these Wall Street connections and stuff like that. You're one of those big corporate entities that takes advantage of the tax system and all sort of stuff and colludes with government. And you decide, you know what, you need to do an internal investigation because something happened in your company. So you send out a request for a former employee who used to work for your company to show up to give testimony before the committee or the internal tribunal, whatever you want to call it, that you have formed in your internal investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, no, I'm not showing up. I left the company for a reason. I want nothing to do with you guys. I'm not showing up. As an owner of that corporation, as a corporation, do you have the authority to arrest them for not abiding by that request? No, you're not a court. You're an entity outside the courts. Your subpoena, your request for your internal investigation, while it's it's important to you, you want the person to show up, it's not legally binding. They can say buzz off because you're not a court. Congress is sort of like that. They're holding a judicial style hearing, and they expect to be able to use judicial instruments in something that has nothing to do with the legislation. They want to do an internal look at things, the little look-see, investigate, whatever, knock yourself out. But it's an internal investigation. It's within, our halls of Congress were being, attacked. We need to look into it. All right, fine, do it. But your subpoena power is nothing more than a request, just like that corporation. Until there is a charge, that due process is going on through the court system, the subpoenas don't have legal authority. A subpoena only has legal authority when it's a part of a court case, when it is a part of the legal process, due process, because we have a separation of powers here, which the word vested gives us the clue into that one in Article 1, Section 1, Article 2, Section 1, and Article 3, Section 1. Each of the powers are vested. It only belongs to that branch. So the legislature doesn't have only the legislative powers, except when they want to do a hearing, then they've got that one judicial power of subpoena. No, that's not how it works. Part of their legislative power may be to create these tribunals, but for them to have judicial powers and authorities that have legal authority, that only belongs to the courts. So hopefully that helps explain. The Organic Act I mentioned earlier, Darren, was not the 1871 it was the 1801 one. As for the discussion regarding that, we'll talk about that another time. It is a long discussion on the Organic Act of 1871. There's language in there that has been misrepresented in some of these conversations about that topic. If you are familiar with me and my shows, then you probably know where I'm coming from. And I think we've done an episode where we talked extensively about this. Maybe we'll do another one in the future. But anyway, hopefully what I just said clears the muddy pain for you. Any questions, comments? Aside from the folks in the chat, chat room too. If you got questions, comments, throw them in there. I'm watching, but I'm right now just addressing you gentlemen.
I'm good.
No, we've been over 1871 a few dozen times. I don't need to hear it again.
Oh, that, yeah. I am probably going to be doing some more stuff regarding that because it is unfortunately parts of that are not necessarily accurate are gaining momentum, and I really feel as a constitutionalist a responsibility to make sure that we understand the language used in these acts and why it's important. But anyway, let's continue down our Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. So the next one is the Congress shall have the power to define and punish piracies. Define. In other words, we're going to say what it is. This is a piracy. This is our definition. Define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. I've always had a bit of an inkling that the capitalization of law of nations there might be kind of a out of the side of the mouth reference to Vattel's Law of Nations, perhaps. I don't have any evidence that supports that, but I've always kind of felt that way. Nonetheless, to define and publish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, the purpose of our naval force is to protect our trade routes. Piracies and felonies committed on the high seas is a part of that responsibility. And absolutely does Congress have the ability to define and punish. So, which means also our Navy has the authority to deal with that out on the high seas. Yes, sir.
I've always interpreted that to mean I thought they were referring to maritime law because they're talking about stuff on the high seas.
Right.
And the maritime law is agreed upon by quote unquote all civilized nations. So would that be accurate or?
Well, yes and no. What it's saying is, yeah, we're going to abide by maritime law that is agreed upon everybody. But in our case, when it comes to our protection of our trade routes, we're going to define what is a piracy and felony. If it's against our ships, against our trade route, it's against us. What's funny is I wrote an article not too long ago that was kind of interesting because it ties into this, because I noticed that we are seeing, once again, this was kind of I'm a Navy guy, all right, let's say that real quick. So maritime activities are very interesting to me, important to me. I like to pay attention to that kind of stuff, and I found it fascinating because the United States Coast Guard, a cutter in the Gulf of Oman, seized a fishing vessel being used to smuggle drugs and seized $33 million of hashish and meth. And it's not the first bust by the U.S. Coast Guard in the Middle East. And I'm thinking, wait a second.
What's the Coast Guard? What's the Coast Guard doing all the way out in Oman?
Good question, and I was curious about that because and this is not the first seizure. Earlier that month, a U.S. Navy ship had seized 2,000 AK-47s, and then the prior year, the Coast Guard had another cutter had seized other drugs and all that. And I'm like, okay, so what's Coast Guard? Because going over, federal government has the authority to be involved in maritime operations. The Article 1, Section 8 does grant the Congress the authority to make legislation defining the punishment of piracies and felonies committed on the high seas, as we just read. As Commander-in-Chief, as per Article 2, Section 2, the President has the authority to deploy the military, and Coast Guard's a part of the military, to carry out that duty. Article 3, Section 2 gives the federal courts the authority to hear maritime law cases and attaint the offenders upon conviction. So the drug bust itself is supported by various granted constitutional authorities. But these seas are outside those that fall under American jurisdiction. So in my mind, I'm thinking only the Navy would be authorized maritime military activities carried out in that part of the world. And then I look up the U.S. code regarding the Coast Guard. It says 33 U.S. Code Chapter 3 is what I found. And it says that the Coast Guard's jurisdiction is all navigable waters of the U.S. landward and the U.S. coastline up to 200 miles from the shore of the U.S. coastline. Last time I checked, the Gulf of Oman is a little bit further than 200 miles off the shore. So I'm confused. How is it that the U.S. Coast Guard is involved? Then I discovered something. See, Coast Guard jurisdiction is not applicable if we are in a state of emergency. In a state of emergency, the Coast Guard can be used anywhere in the world. Hence the reason why you've seen, the Coast Guard was involved in Vietnam and World War II in some cases. So, in other words, by the Coast Guard operating in the Middle East, what the federal government is telling you is we are in a state of emergency. Question: when have we not been in a state of emergency? It seems like we've been in a state of emergency my whole life. And if you're in a state of emergency, then that means emergency powers apply in their minds. And if emergency powers apply, well, what can the government do if emergency powers are in play? Anything. Constitution doesn't matter because it's an emergency. Brady, because I know you've studied the Constitution quite a bit in the last couple of years, and I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm putting him up against the wall here. He's got to come up with the answer, so it's going to be tough. Show me where, which article and section that the words emergency powers appear in the Constitution.
It's in this really small fine print at the very. Nope, it's not there. Nowhere.
Isn't that something? Darren says, declared by who? Question mark. You answer your question if you put that last word in all caps. So we have a situation. We have a problem here. So yes, getting back to our study now, yes, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, it's in the Constitution. But what entity does it? We've got a problem. Naval power, not Coast Guard power. Unless, of course, we're in a state of emergency, I am told. Well, it brings to mind a commentary by a guy named George Orwell in a book called 1984 about how emergencies must be in perpetuity, because that's where the true power comes. And the purpose of the war is not the war, not to win the war. The purpose of the war is to keep the war going in perpetuity. The war on drugs, the war against other powers, the war on climate, the war on
poverty,
scamdemics, the war on poverty. See, we're always at war with something. It's an emergency.
Vietnam War, the war on terror.
Yeah, don't you love it?
What are they all?
The emergencies of perpetuity.
What do they all have in common? Increased government spending, increased government power, and none of them actually win their war.
And frivolous spending.
Goes back to a friend of mine who I got to know who used to be a Democrat running for office in LA County, and he had actually one of the high-ranking Democrats, and he asked a silly question. He says, well, we keep talking about these different issues, but I don't know if we're making a serious attempt to resolve these issues. We really need to to solve these problems. And the room went silent. We were talking about poverty and housing and all these different problems. And the room went silent. And then finally, one of the top-notch guys in the room says, well, if we were to solve those problems, what would we run on?
Mm-hmm.
The aim of government is not to solve the problem. It's to create the problem and to keep it going in perpetuity. Gosh, that sounds like a certain dialectic. Let me think about it for a second. Oh, the Hegelian dialectic.
Problem, reaction, solution.
Amazing what topics show up when you talk about the Constitution. All right, let's continue. And we got about 15 minutes for this last one, and that's about what it's going to take. Congress shall have the power to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. I'm going to work backwards on this one. To make rules concerning captures on land and water. In other words, Guantanamo Bay is constitutional. When it comes to the enemy, they are not to go to a civilian court. They are not to be treated just like you and I under the Constitution. It is up to Congress to make the rules on how we're going to deal with these captures on land and water. And historically, it's always been a pretty tough type of treatment for good reason. So Guantanamo Bay and other techniques to get information and all of that, that's all up to rules that were established by Congress. Now, once again, we're talking about Congress. People go, whoa, wait a second. I don't trust Congress. Remember, we're looking at them at the time and how they originally designed Congress compared to what it is today. We need to get back to the original design if that's going to work and make sense. Going backwards, the second thing, grant letters of marque and reprisal. A letter of marque and reprisal is basically for, if you're talking about sea vessels, it is basically a legalized piracy. What a letter of marque and reprisal basically is you now have this letter, you represent the government. What would happen with the U.S. Navy in those early years is we didn't have a very big Navy. We didn't have very many vessels. So we would give a letter of marque and reprisal to a fishing vessel, a supply vessel, a local vessel from Boston or whatever. And they would now be also a part of the United States Navy at that point. So federal government can do that through their Congress. Now, if Congress has the authority to grant those letters of marque and reprisal, once again, and I said this earlier, what process does it have to go through? Both houses need to approve it. It needs to be signed by the president, just like anything else that's proposed by Congress. And then finally, to declare war. To declare war and to wage war are two different things. In the Articles of Confederation, it explains that. Now, I know that I'm not a person who necessarily loves war. I am a person who believes that we should have a strong military, a strong defense, and be prepared for whatever worse they can throw at us, whoever they may be. But when it comes to the actual operations of war, whether you support a particular war or not, from a legal sense, from a constitutional sense, I don't want to get into which one of these wars were right, wrong, or in between, or illegal, or whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just talking Constitution here. The president, as commander-in-chief, may wage war. He doesn't have to get permission from Congress. He doesn't have to get a declaration of war. And if he's operating in a theater of war without a declaration, it is not an illegal war. A declaration of war is a good thing, and it does formalize the action, and it changes the dynamics of what's going on. Declaration of war, last declaration of war that has actually been in play was World War II. It is possible to have an undeclared war, but yet Congress fund it and not necessarily disapprove of it because they're funding it, but they didn't issue a declaration of war. One such war may have been the one in Iraq. Once again, I'm not getting into whether or not we agree with this. I'm just telling you instances in which it happened. Two other times it happened were the Barbary Wars, one under Madison, one under Thomas Jefferson. And gentlemen, if Jefferson and Madison were willing to wage wars without a declaration of war, I have a feeling they kind of understood the Constitution. It gives me a thought. Now, not that I'm saying these guys are perfect, and I mean, it's like Louisiana Purchase is kind of an interesting situation with Jefferson, but for the most part, that tells me that if they're willing to wage war without a declaration, that's a constitutional action, because both of them did it. And Congress was happy to fund those wars without necessarily declaring war. They weren't complaining that it was an illegal war. So we are recognizing, and the whole point of this discussion is I want you just to recognize the constitutional end of it, is it is legal for a president to wage war without it being declared war. What's the difference between him waging war without it being declared and a declared war? A declared war is a formal declaration to the world. So if there is a declared war, the declaration has been put out there, and because I'm a Navy guy, I'm going to think of it this way. You got two, battling ships, man, the battleships, warships, they're firing at each other, and a ship from another country accidentally gets into the line of fire, it gets sunk. Tough. A declaration of war was put out there. You knew, you went into the war zone. You shouldn't have got your ship in the way it got sunk. Tough. If there is no declaration of war, now there is no formal declaration. Ship A and Ship B is going at it. Ship C shows up, got sunk. That was an act of war because there was no formal declaration. So the whole dynamic of what's going on in the war zone changes based on whether or not there was a formal declaration, first of all. Second of all, well, gosh, Doug, what if the president's being a warmonger and he's just waging war all over the place, and you're saying he could just do it? Well, there's still checks and balances. First of all, he can only do it as long as he's got the money to do it. Congress has the power of the purse strings. They yank the funding, no war. Number one. Number two, if he's doing it excessively and they believe that he is abusing that authority, abusing that power, they can do something else, impeach him for it. So Congress ultimately has the authority of oversight over the president's waging of war, and the states, having their voice originally in the Senate, had indirect oversight also over the waging of war. So yes, president can wage war without having to get the congressional confirmation or approval. But if they don't approve of it, they can starve it of funding. It does not need a declaration in order to be a legal military action. However, the dynamics of the situation become dangerous. Also, what happens if there's no declaration of war? The consequences are on the shoulders of the president. If Congress says, you know what, we're going to declare war, they are joining in on that opportunity to have the consequences fall on their shoulders. They're also going to be willing to take the whatever good or bad consequences in regards to it, because now they have given their blessing, so to speak, and announced to the world with that formal declaration, we are in a state of war. Hopefully that clears it up and clarifies enough that nobody's got something ton of questions. Does it make sense?
It does.
Indeed.
Of course, it doesn't say anything about police actions. Or,
yeah, well, it's funny that they like to use those words because the Democrats have a history of being anti-war. So when they commit war actions, they can't call it war, because then you might shout BS on them.
And then you have the really illegal ones that are sort of like the covert actions of our intelligence agencies, and which are nowhere near constitutionally authorized, yet they happen all the time.
Oh, you mean these projects and operations that have special cute little names?
Well, I'd talk about 80 plus color revolutions over the last 60 years.
Yeah, there's that too.
We've overthrown over 80 governments. None of that was authorized. Of course. That's something I may have made a video about. Speaking of which,
maybe now that you have a channel up, since we're getting to those final 4 minutes of the show, maybe we can, I don't know, I'll twist your arm and encourage you, as you reluctantly decide to share with us what your new channel is. Go ahead. I ask you to reluctantly share with us all that information.
Well, I anticipated that, so I'll just go ahead and paste the link in there. Now I've switched to it's a new Rumble channel. I brought over some of my old content from the War Hamster Rumble channel. Please like and subscribe, because I'm leaving 1,500 subscribers behind. The reason I switched it, my new channel is called Brady Fox, FOXX. I did that because I'm now writing some Substacks. And when you write in some of these Substacks articles, I want to be something that can be shown to legislators. And they're going to take me a lot more seriously if it's got a person's name on it than if you have a war hamster. So I kind of had to go with a little bit more professional approach. But I'm like I said, I walked away from 1,500 subscribers, and I'm going to try to announce to them that I have to move. But we'll see what happens. Anyways, I got a brand new video up on there. It's about what is it? The security. It's called The Shadow State, Part 3: The Rise of the CIA. And I thought it was a pretty fun one. It was from a presentation I gave in Constitution class when Doug was out of town a couple of weeks ago. But anyways, check it out, like, subscribe, and please share.
All right, Doug, any other things you'd like to promote while you're at it?
We'll do that next time. I wanted you and Ron to address a question in the chat. Stephanie says, for the new people, they're asking why we don't do the live stream on Rumble instead of YouTube.
Because we like to use StreamYard, and StreamYard doesn't work with Rumble. And because now that's kind of where the bulk of our audience has been. We haven't.
StreamYard does work with Rumble, but it's we're only getting 20 people show up, so live, and it's YouTube has a much better platform. We don't really talk about things that are incendiary, and there's much more audience on YouTube. So we can obviously we can still upload to Rumble, but it's it makes a lot more sense to keep this on YouTube.
Well, I'm sure down the road there'll be evolution of everything that we're doing, and when that evolution begins, there may be, as Brady has done with his, some migrations, but at the moment, those migrations have not occurred, and so This particular program remains on YouTube, and it remains the three of us, and it remains on Tuesdays at 3 o'clock Pacific time. Anything else that either one of you would like to add, Brady or Ron, before I sign us out?
Yeah, if you guys want to check us out on Sunday on Patriot Soapbox, Doug and I will be on with Alan Myers, and we'll be going through some really fun Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. Anti-Federalist number 9, which is one of the most important ones, and Federalist number 10, which I would say was one of my 2 favorite Federalist papers. So if we get to both of those on Sunday, you're in for a treat. But Anti-Federalist number 9 could take a while because there's a lot there.
To watch it live, it'll be at DLive.tv/PSB. PSB standing for Patriot Soapbox. So DLive.tv/PSB. That's the best way to watch it live. Patriot Soapbox does have a Rumble channel, and eventually they put those shows on their Rumble channel. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it takes a few weeks or a month or so. Once again, there's going to be some migrations. There's going to be some evolutions. How we're going to go through the Federalist Papers on that channel. After that, what becomes of our material and where it's available is going to once again evolve. We're in the process, or at least Brady and I are in the process of a retrofit and renovation of DouglasVGibbs.com and ConstitutionAssociation.com, and a creation of the Constitution Restoration Society, which is a partnership that Brady and I are working on. We want that organization to be a key component in a lot of our national, for lack of a better word, because I don't like the word national, but I'll have to use it, national exposure. And ultimately, what I would like to see, and I talked about this with someone today who's important to me. As a matter of fact, Brady knows what I'm talking about also eventually putting together a physical location that people can go to. We have one in Texas. We have one in the Midwest. There's a bunch of them on the East Coast, a constitutional education resource center type place. There's nothing on the West Coast. I want us to be able to do that. Stephanie, thoughts on national popular vote and how to stop a state from implementing it? National popular vote is the death of this country. We go to a national popular vote, even with, despite shenanigans that go on, irregularities and anomalies, so we'll call them that. Basically, with national popular vote, the 5 or 6 largest cities, maybe only the 4 or 5 largest cities would win every election, and everybody else's votes just would not matter. The Electoral College exists for a reason, and we need to be involved to convince our states not to play that game. We need to preserve the Electoral College, and we need to actually return it to its original construction. It has changed. While it's not what it used to be, it's still better than a national popular vote. But we really need to get back to its original intent, and that is a discussion for when we're in Article 2. So I'll save the rest of that for Article 2.
Real quick, 2 more things to promote. Our friend who is here today, Andrew, 1776, on his show this Friday at 5:30 p.m. He's got a special guest. Apparently, it's an ex-military guy. He's going to have some fun stuff to talk about. I am not sure if I'll be joining him, and I do not know if Doug is. Also, Ron has just informed me he put up 3 new videos yesterday, and you can always check him out at the Untold History channel on Rumble. If Ron, you want to
I had two shows. I had 2 shows on Untold History. I did an interview with Dr. Jason Dean, and then in the evening with Gordon, we talked about the Trump speech, and then I had Glitch in the Matrix, which was the yesterday evening as well. So. And anyway, the one thing that I have been doing on my channel is I've been uploading a lot of the older documentaries of 9/11. Going through, I've got about probably 20 documentaries to upload about 9/11. Yes, and I was on. Yeah, I did Nino. Raging Smirk. I saw. Nino and I do a lot of stuff together. A lot of people don't know this, but Nino and I are actually pretty good friends. So we talk rather frequently.
And Raging Smirk, no to ranked choice voting also. Absolutely. For those who are not sure what ranked choice is, that's basically where you vote. But in rank, what it does is it ensures that the lefty moderate always gets in if they're not able to do other stuff. So, yeah, it's bad news too. Okay. And finally, yours truly. I did 2 videos last week. You can go to youtube.com/Douglas V. Gibbs, bitshoot.com/Douglas V. Gibbs, rumble.com/Douglas V. Gibbs, or brighteon.com/channels/Douglas V. Gibbs. That's right, Douglas V. Gibbs. My name are the keywords in all of them. And I do have a couple of other channels also, but number one, their names are too long to explain. And number two, I didn't put the videos on there yet, so you wouldn't find the new videos. And I've got a couple of new ones coming up this week. So definitely visit those video channels. You can also visit douglasvgibbs.com/video to learn more about the videos, douglasvgibbs.com/radio to learn about my 2 radio programs on Saturday. I am on AM radio. I also have other online things I do and a blog at politicalpistachio.com. It's mostly a reminder of my classes, but yes, every once in a while I even put articles, videos, and stuff like that on there too. One that I would encourage you to search for is my article last week on localism. So go to politicalpistachio.com, find the search bar on the side, and just type in localism, or you can scroll down until you find it. It's I think an article that all of us need to be reading.
Hey, Doug.
Yes.
Oh, finish up.
United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. But I guess I'm not leaving just yet because Brady has one more thing. Go ahead.
Oh, I'll do it off air.
All right, very good. All right, so that all said, I'm headed off to Capistrano for teacher class. I do teach 6 classes in Southern